Hi there. Welcome back to the fourth week in our Lenten journey through 1 John. So far in this series, John's talked about walking in the light, learning to love one another, and remembering that we're children of God. This week, he turns to something many of us struggle with in a noisy world, the question of discernment. Listen to what he said in chapter 4, verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God. And John assumes something important. Not every voice that claims authority actually leads toward the truth. Part of spiritual maturity is learning to recognize which voices shape us. Your group's going to explore 3 questions that help us think about the issue of discernment in everyday life. And the first question is, what voices shape people most right now? You know, for most of us, the number of voices we hear in a single day is just overwhelming. News cycles, social media feeds, podcasts, commentary. We're surrounded by constant interpretation of the world. And many of those voices run on emotion, very strong emotions like outrage and fear and urgency. Another powerful influence is what we would call tribal voices. These are the voices that reinforce what we already believe. The ones that make us feel secure because they confirm our perspective. But John reminds us that spiritual maturity requires asking a deeper question. Does this voice lead me toward Christ, or does this voice pull me somewhere else? The second question, why is discernment often difficult? One reason is that not every false voice sounds obviously false. Many ideas contain a partial truth. That's why discernment requires attentiveness. Another challenge is, frankly, it's exhaustion. When we're tired, we tend to accept the loudest or the most urgent voice instead of the wisest. Sometimes we confuse volume with authority. Just because something is said confidently or repeatedly doesn't mean it's true. Discernment asks us to slow down and to ask, is this voice forming Christ-like love in me? And the third question, how does fear distort discernment? Fear narrows our field of vision. Instead of asking, is this Christ-like, we start asking, is this safe? Or is this winning? Fear also puts us toward reaction instead of reflection. Urgent voices, they feel persuasive because they promise quick clarity. But John invites believers into a slower kind of wisdom. The kind that looks for the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of truth and humility and love. And this is where prevenient grace comes. Prevenient grace means God is already at work before we even realize. God's Spirit is always drawing people toward the truth, toward life, toward love. Discernment is not about becoming suspicious of everything. It's about learning to notice where grace is already moving, where the Spirit of Christ is present. At Hillspring, we talk about this through our value, become. We become more like Jesus through the work of the Holy Spirit. Part of becoming like Christ is learning what shapes us, because what we listen to eventually shapes who we become. Discernment is really about formation. What voices are shaping your heart? This week's practice is something called a listening examine. And at the end of the day, just take a few quiet minutes and ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I sense God today? What voices shaped my thinking today? And which of those voices led me toward love? Discernment grows through attentiveness. And the more we notice what shapes us, the wiser we become. So as your group talks together this week, be honest about the voices that influence you. I mean, we all have them. And the goal is not perfection. The goal is learning to recognize the voice of Christ more clearly.